The warning sirens of Kepler Station screamed through the void as Commander Zarath pressed her scaled hands against the cracked viewport. Behind her, the last evacuation ships of the Vorthak Confederation prepared to jump to hyperspace, their hulls scarred from plasma fire and debris impacts. The once mighty fleet that had defended their homeworld for 3 centuries was now reduced to 17 battered vessels carrying the final survivors of her species. "Commander, the Harvester swarm has broken through the outer defense grid," reported Navigation Officer Kelth, his voice trembling with exhaustion. "They're targeting the civilian transports." Zarath watched in horror as the nightmare machines that had consumed 12 star systems in the past year descended upon their position. The harvesters moved like a plague of mechanical locusts, each vessel the size of a small moon, their dark hulls bristling with energy weapons that could crack planets. They had appeared without warning from the galactic rim, consuming everything in their path: worlds, civilizations, entire species reduced to raw materials for their endless expansion. "Signal all ships to prepare for emergency jump," Zarath commanded, her throat tight with grief. "Execute Protocol 7. Protocol 7 meant abandoning their homeworld forever. 3 billion years of Vorthak civilization, their art, their history, their sacred burial grounds, all would be consumed by the mechanical horror behind them. The navigation computers had identified only one destination within their limited fuel reserves: a small blue world in a system the locals called Sol. The humans had established first contact with the galactic community only 50 years ago, making them one of the youngest civilizations in known space. Most species considered them primitive, barely worth notice. Their technology was crude, their military insignificant compared to the great powers. But Earth was remote, far from major shipping lanes, and most importantly, it was the only habitable world within range. As the jump engines charged, Zarath composed the transmission that would either save or doom her people. The human governments had shown surprising diplomatic skill in their brief time among the stars, but asking them to shelter 17,000 refugees from a threat that had already destroyed civilizations far more advanced than theirs seemed like asking for a miracle. The hyperspace jump felt different this time, filled with the weight of finality. When the Vorthak fleet emerged in the Sol system 3 days later, they found something unexpected waiting for them. A single human vessel approached their formation, its design crude but functional. The ship was barely larger than a Vorthak scout craft, its hull made of primitive steel and ceramic composites. By galactic standards, it was a relic. Yet something in its steady approach suggested confidence rather than recklessness. "Vorthak vessels, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earthship Endeavour," came the transmission in perfectly pronounced Vorthak trade tongue. "We received your emergency broadcast and have been authorized by the United Earth Council to guide you to Sanctuary. Please adjust your course to follow our heading." Zarath stared at the primitive ship leading her massive fleet toward the blue world ahead. How had these humans learned their language so quickly? Their databases indicated that first contact had occurred through universal translators, not linguistic study. "Captain Chen," Zarath responded carefully, "we must inform you of the threat pursuing our people. The harvesters have consumed 12 star systems. They will follow our trail here. Your world may be in grave danger by sheltering us." The human's response came without hesitation. "Commander Zarath, we're aware of the risks. We've been monitoring galactic communications since your first distress calls 3 months ago. Earth stands ready to provide sanctuary for your people and defend them if necessary." The navigation officer looked up from his console with confusion. "Commander, they're directing us toward their homeworld itself, not to orbital stations or outer system facilities." This was unprecedented. No species in galactic history had ever offered their actual homeworld as sanctuary to refugees, especially not when those refugees brought such terrible danger with them. The risk was enormous if the harvesters followed. Earth would be directly in the path of destruction. As their fleet approached the blue world, Zarath saw something that made her breath catch in her throat. Earth was beautiful beyond description, its swirling white clouds and vast blue oceans unlike anything in Vorthak space. Their own homeworld had been a harsh desert planet, beautiful in its own way but stark and unforgiving. This world practically radiated life and abundance. More importantly, She saw the preparations humanity had made for their arrival. Massive orbital platforms were under construction, clearly designed as temporary housing for refugees. Supply ships moved in coordinated patterns, delivering resources to processing centers. The humans had mobilized their entire civilization to prepare for the Vorthak arrival. "How did they know we were coming?" asked Engineer Mothka, studying the readings from their sensors. "These preparations would have taken weeks to organize." Captain Chen's voice came over the communications again, answering their unspoken questions. "We've been tracking the Harvester advance for months, through deep space sensor networks and refugee reports. When we calculated possible escape routes from your system, Sol was the most logical destination. We've been preparing since before your final battle." The implications of this statement stunned Zarath. These humans had predicted their defeat and prepared sanctuary before the Vorthak themselves had even considered retreat. They had demonstrated strategic thinking that rivaled the greatest military minds in the galaxy. Yet they were supposed to be a primitive species barely capable of interstellar travel. As the Vorthak fleet settled into orbit around Earth, Captain Chen transmitted detailed coordination plans that showed remarkable understanding of their species' needs. The humans had studied Vorthak physiology and culture, preparing appropriate living spaces, food synthesis programs, and even recreational facilities designed for their psychology. "Commander," Chen continued, "we know this is difficult for your people. Losing one's homeworld is a trauma we can't fully comprehend. But we want you to know that Earth welcomes you, not just as refugees, but as neighbors. Our scientists are eager to learn from your knowledge, and our engineers believe we can work together to improve both our technologies." The offer was generous beyond belief, but Zarath felt compelled to warn them again. "Captain Chen, you don't understand the full scope of what's coming. The Harvesters don't just destroy worlds, they convert entire stellar masses into more ships. They grow stronger with every system they consume. No military force in the galaxy has been able to stop them." There was a pause before Chen responded. And when she did, her voice carried a tone that sent chills through Zarath's scales. "Commander, we appreciate the warning. We've been analyzing all available data on Harvester tactics and capabilities since their first appearance. We believe we understand what we're facing, and we're prepared to defend this system and everyone in it." The confidence in the human's voice seemed misplaced given their technological limitations, but something in her manner suggested she knew something the rest of the galaxy didn't. As Zarath watched human ships moving in precise formations around Earth, she began to wonder if there was more to humanity than the galactic community had realized. Over the following weeks, as Vorthak refugees settled into temporary habitats on Earth's moon and orbital stations, Zarath witnessed something extraordinary. The humans didn't just provide shelter, they provided hope. Human engineers worked alongside Vorthak technicians to improve their damaged ships. Human medical teams studied Vorthak physiology to provide better care for their injured. Human teachers began learning Vorthak history and culture to help preserve what they had lost. But most remarkably, human military officials approached Zarath with detailed questions about Harvester tactics, weapons, and weaknesses. They were preparing for war with the confidence of a species that had never known defeat, despite facing an enemy that had conquered civilizations far more advanced than their own. "Commander," said General Harrison, Earth's top military strategist, during one of their briefings, "we'd like your help in understanding Harvester coordination protocols. Our preliminary analysis suggests they rely heavily on networked control systems. If that's accurate, it may represent a significant vulnerability." Zarath studied the primitive human with growing respect. His species might lack advanced technology, but their strategic thinking was sophisticated beyond their apparent capabilities. "General, the Harvesters do operate through collective intelligence, but their network protocols are protected by quantum encryption that no known technology can break." General Harrison smiled, an expression that somehow conveyed both warmth and predatory anticipation. "Commander, humanity has always specialized in finding solutions to impossible problems. We'd like to show you something that might change your assessment of our capabilities." As he led her to a classified facility deep beneath Earth's surface, Zarath began to suspect that humanity's reputation as a primitive species was about to be dramatically revised. The question was whether their hidden capabilities would be enough to face the approaching storm, or if she had simply led the harvesters to consume another world in their endless hunger for conquest. The facility General Harrison showed her defied everything she thought she knew about human technology. The corridors stretched for kilometers underground, lined with equipment that seemed impossible given their supposed technological level. Massive computational arrays hummed with processing power that rivaled anything in Vorthak space, while laboratories contained experimental weapons that pushed the boundaries of known physics. "How long have you been preparing for this?" Zarath asked, as they walked past a testing chamber where humans were experimenting with what appeared to be controlled antimatter reactions. "Humanity has been preparing for existential threats since we first looked up at the stars," General Harrison replied. "We've always assumed that if we encountered other species, some of them might not be friendly. When we joined the galactic community, we accelerated our defensive preparations while maintaining the appearance of a peaceful, primitive civilization. The implications of this revelation were staggering. Humanity had deliberately concealed their true capabilities from the galaxy, allowing other species to underestimate them while secretly developing weapons and strategies for interstellar warfare. It was a level of long-term planning and deception that impressed even Zarath's tactical mind. "The harvesters will be here soon," she warned, watching human technicians calibrate weapons that her own species would have considered theoretical impossibilities. "Our deep space sensors detected their advanced scouts 3 days ago. The main swarm will arrive within the week." General Harrison nodded grimly. "We know. Our own sensor networks have been tracking them since they entered this spiral arm. We've had months to prepare, and we intend to give them a reception they'll never forget." As if summoned by his words, alarms began sounding throughout the facility. The Harvester Vanguard had arrived at the edge of the Sol system, and humanity was about to face its first test against an enemy that had consumed civilizations across the galaxy. Zarath could only hope that these remarkable humans possessed the courage to match their hidden capabilities, because the survival of both their species now depended on it. The war room beneath Geneva buzzed with controlled chaos, as Admiral Elena Vasquez studied the holographic display, showing the approaching harvester fleet. 37 massive vessels moved in perfect formation toward the inner system, each one capable of sterilizing a planet in hours. Behind them, long-range sensors detected the massive industrial ships that would strip mine Earth's solar system once resistance was eliminated. "Ma'am, the Vorthak refugees are requesting permission to evacuate," reported Communications Officer Martinez. "They're offering to take human civilians with them to safety." Admiral Vasquez glanced at Commander Zarath, who stood beside the human command staff with obvious discomfort. The Vorthak leader had been trying to convince the humans to flee ever since the harvesters entered the system. Her people had seen this scenario play out across the galaxy, civilizations making brave last stands only to be consumed like all the rest. "Commander, I appreciate the offer," Admiral Vasquez said calmly, "but we've invested too much in this system to abandon it now. Besides, running would only delay the inevitable. Eventually, we'd run out of places to hide." Zarath's scales shifted color with agitation. "Admiral, you don't understand. The harvesters have consumed civilizations with millions of years of technological advancement. The Eternal Dominion had weapons that could crack moons, and they lasted less than 6 months. The Crystal Hegemony commanded forces across 3 spiral arms, and they fell in a matter of weeks. What can one primitive world hope to accomplish?" Admiral Vasquez smiled, an expression that had become familiar to the Vorthak refugees over the past month. It was the same confident smile that had greeted them when they arrived, desperate and broken. The same smile that had welcomed them, not as burden, but as family. But now Zarath recognized something else in that expression, the predatory anticipation of a hunter who had spent years preparing for this moment. "Commander, you're about to discover why humanity earned its place among the stars," the Admiral said, turning to her staff. "Signal all fleets Operation Lighthouse is now active. Bring our children home." The command seemed cryptic until the tactical display began updating with new contacts. Ships appeared throughout the Sol system, not the few dozen vessels that galactic intelligence estimated Earth possessed, but hundreds. They emerged from hidden bases on asteroids, uncloaked from stealth positions behind planets, and dropped out of hyperspace from staging areas in neighboring systems. Zarath watched in stunned silence as Earth's true fleet revealed itself. These weren't the primitive craft that humanity had shown to galactic visitors. These ships were sleek predators, with hulls made from materials she couldn't identify, armed with weapon systems that defied conventional understanding of human technology. "How many ships do you have?" she whispered, watching the tactical display populate with more and more friendly contacts. "Enough," Admiral Vasquez replied simply. "We've been building for 50 years. Ever since we realized what kind of galaxy we lived in. Every asteroid mining operation, every deep space research station, every commercial shipping route has been part of our defensive network. Humanity learned long ago that the best way to survive is to be vastly underestimated while being thoroughly prepared." The lead harvester vessels reached the orbit of Jupiter and immediately began their standard attack pattern. Massive energy beams lanced out toward human positions, weapons powerful enough to vaporize anything in their path. But instead of finding targets, the beams struck what appeared to be empty space and simply disappeared. "Defensive screens are holding," reported the tactical officer. "The harvesters are scanning for our ships, but can't lock onto them." Zareth stared at the display in confusion. The human vessels were clearly visible on the tactical screen, but apparently invisible to harvester sensors. How is that possible? "Their scanning technology is beyond anything in the galaxy, because they're scanning for technology they understand," explained Dr. Chen, Earth's chief scientist and Captain Chen's sister. "We've developed our stealth systems based on principles that evolved on Earth rather than following conventional galactic engineering. Our ships don't just hide from sensors, they become functionally invisible to any scanning system based on quantum resonance detection." The implications were staggering. Humanity had developed entirely new approaches to technology, creating capabilities that even advanced galactic civilizations couldn't detect or counter. They had effectively become ghosts in space, able to move and strike without being seen. The first human attack came without warning. Harvester vessels that had been advancing confidently suddenly erupted in chains of explosions as invisible weapons struck their hulls. The attacks didn't come from any visible direction, they seemed to materialize from the fabric of space itself. "Quantum torpedo impacts confirmed," reported the weapons officer. "Enemy shields are adapting, but slowly. They've never encountered weapons that phase in and out of normal space-time." Admiral Vasquez watched the tactical display with satisfaction as human ships began their carefully choreographed attack. Each vessel moved with impossible precision, striking and disappearing before the harvesters could respond. It was like watching a pack of wolves take down much larger prey through coordinated attacks and superior tactics. But the harvesters were learning. Their adaptation protocols began to compensate for human stealth technology, and their massive firepower started to find targets. The first human ship lost was a destroyer that lingered too long after an attack run. It died in a flash of antimatter annihilation that lit up the darkness between worlds. "They're learning our patterns," observed Commander Zareth. "Once they adapt fully, your stealth advantage will be gone." "We know," Admiral Vasquez replied calmly. "That's why Phase 1 was always meant to be temporary. All ships, execute Phase 2. Release the Angels." New contacts appeared on the tactical display. But these weren't ships. They were smaller, faster, and moved with an organic fluidity that defied mechanical explanation. Thousands of them swarmed out from hidden positions throughout the system, converging on the harvester fleet like schools of luminous fish. "What are those?" Zareth asked, watching the strange objects dance between harvester vessels with impossible agility. "Autonomous combat drones," Dr. Chen explained, "but not like anything the galaxy has seen. We call them Angels because they're self-modifying AI constructs that can adapt their tactics in real time. Each one is effectively immortal even if destroyed. Their consciousness downloads to backup units and rejoins the fight with all accumulated experience intact." The Angels attacked with terrifying efficiency. They were too small and fast for harvester weapons to target effectively, but each carried firepower disproportionate to their size. More importantly, they learned from every engagement, adapting their strategies faster than even harvester systems could compensate. Watching the battle unfold, Zareth began to understand what made humanity different from every other species in the galaxy. Other civilizations had developed technology, to become more powerful. Humanity had developed technology to become more unpredictable. They didn't just build better weapons, they built weapons that couldn't be understood or countered by conventional thinking. The Harvester fleet found itself fighting an enemy that violated every rule of galactic warfare. Human ships appeared and disappeared without pattern. Their weapons struck from impossible angles. Their drones learned and adapted faster than any mechanical intelligence should be capable of. For the first time in their conquest of the galaxy, the Harvesters faced opponents they couldn't simply overpower, but the battle was far from over. The Harvester command ships began implementing new tactics, sacrificing smaller vessels to study human technology. They were learning, adapting, preparing to counter humanity's advantages through sheer analytical power and overwhelming numbers. "Admiral," reported the sensor officer, "the main Harvester fleet has jumped into the system. 200 vessels, including 7 planet killers." The tactical display updated to show a force so massive it dwarfed everything that had come before. These weren't just the advanced scouts, this was the full power of the Harvester Collective, the same force that had broken civilizations across the galaxy. Admiral Vasquez studied the display for a long moment, then turned to Commander Zarath with that same predatory smile. "Commander, would you like to see what humanity does when we stop holding back?" Before Zarath could respond, every screen in the command center switched to display a single message. "Operation Archangel is authorized. All safeties disabled. God help us all." Throughout the Sol system, hidden installations that had remained dormant began powering up. Massive structures built into asteroids started emerging from camouflage that had hidden them for decades. Weapons, platforms that dwarfed anything in human space revealed themselves. Their energy signatures so powerful, they registered as stellar phenomena. "What have you built?" Zarath whispered, watching readings that shouldn't have been possible for any single planet civilization. "Insurance," Admiral Vasquez replied grimly. "We built the means to defend our home, no matter what it cost or how long it took. The question isn't whether we can stop the Harvesters, it's whether we can stop them before we're forced to use weapons that might damage the galaxy itself." As the massive Harvester reinforcements moved toward Earth, humanity prepared to reveal just how far they were willing to go to protect their home and the refugees who had sought sanctuary among the stars. The real war was about to begin, and neither the galaxy nor the Harvesters were prepared for what humanity had become in the shadows of space. The first planet killer weapon fired, its beam capable of cracking continental plates and boiling oceans. The beam struck Earth's outer defensive perimeter and simply stopped, absorbed by energy fields that converted the attack into harmless radiation. Humanity hadn't just learned to hide from their enemies, they had learned to turn their enemies' greatest weapons against them. "Impossible," Zarath breathed, watching displays that showed Earth's defensive systems absorbing enough energy to power entire star systems. No single world could generate that kind of protective field. Dr. Chen smiled sadly. "You're right. No single world could do this alone. But Earth isn't alone anymore. We've been building a network of defensive installations throughout this spiral arm for decades. Every uninhabited system, every asteroid field, every dead world has become part of our defensive grid. When humanity decided to protect this system, we made it the most fortified location in the galaxy." The realization hit Zarath like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't just been preparing to defend Earth, they had been preparing to defend everyone who might seek refuge here. The entire region of space had been converted into a fortress designed to protect not just one species, but any species that needed sanctuary from the darkness between the stars. As the battle intensified, and more of humanity's hidden weapons revealed themselves, Zarath began to understand that her people hadn't just found refuge on Earth. They had found something far more precious. They had found a species willing to risk everything to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The question now was whether humanity's remarkable preparations would be enough to face the full fury of the Harvester Collective, or if their noble sacrifice would simply add another chapter to the galaxy's growing catalog of heroic defeats. The Sol system had become a graveyard of broken machines. For 6 days, the battle had raged across space from Mercury to the outer planets, turning the peaceful solar system into a hellscape of plasma fire and twisted metal. The Harvester Collective had thrown everything they possessed at humanity's defenses, and for the first time in their galactic conquest, they were losing. Commander Zareth stood on the observation deck of the human command ship Indomitable, watching the final phase of the battle unfold. Around her, human officers worked with mechanical precision despite having been awake for nearly a week straight. They showed no signs of exhaustion, no hint of doubt, only the grim determination of a species that had prepared for this moment their entire existence as a galactic civilization. Status report. Admiral Vasquez called from the command center, her voice hoarse but steady. Harvester fleet strength down to 63%, replied the tactical officer. They've lost all 7 planet killers and most of their heavy assault vessels. Our losses stand at 12% of fleet assets and 8% of defensive installations. The numbers were staggering. Humanity was not just surviving against an enemy that had conquered the galaxy, they were winning. The Harvesters, for all their technological superiority and overwhelming numbers, had never encountered an opponent like this. Admiral, came the voice of Dr. Chen over the communications system. We're detecting massive energy buildups in the remaining Harvester vessels. They're powering systems we haven't seen before. Zareth felt her scales shift with familiar dread. They're preparing their final protocol, she said quietly. When the Harvesters realize they cannot win through conventional means, they activate their stellar conversion weapons. They'll try to turn your sun into a weapon against you. Admiral Vasquez turned to look at the Vorthak commander with interest. Stellar conversion? They can manipulate our sun? They harvest the energy of entire stars and redirect it as a weapon, Zareth explained, her voice heavy with the memory of watching it happen to other systems. No defense can withstand the focused power of a stellar core. They used this weapon to destroy the crystal hegemony's homeworld. The star itself became a cannon that vaporized everything in the system. The human officers exchanged glances, but Zareth was surprised to see no panic in their expressions. Instead, she saw something that looked almost like relief. Well, Admiral Vasquez said with dark humor, I suppose it's time to show them why humanity chose this system specifically for our home. Before Zareth could ask what she meant, new contacts appeared on the tactical display. But these weren't ships, they were structures emerging from Sol itself, rising out of the sun's corona like metal flowers blooming in nuclear fire. Massive installations that had been hidden within the star began to reveal themselves, their hulls made of materials that could exist in the heart of a stellar furnace. What are those? Zareth whispered, watching displays that showed engineering on a scale she had never imagined. Solar collection arrays. Dr. Chen's voice came over the communications, filled with scientific pride. We've been building inside Sol for 40 years, using the star's own energy to construct a network of installations that can manipulate stellar output. If the Harvesters want to turn our sun into a weapon, they're welcome to try. We've already done it. The implications hit Zareth like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't just fortified their system, they had fortified their star itself. They had turned their sun into the ultimate defensive weapon, a fortress powered by stellar fusion and controlled by human engineering. The Harvester Collective seemed to realize the same thing. Their vessels, which had been moving to implement stellar conversion, suddenly began retreating toward the edge of the system. For the first time since their appearance in the galaxy, the Harvesters were showing something that looked like fear. But humanity wasn't finished. Admiral Vasquez activated a general communications channel that broadcast on all frequencies throughout the system, ensuring that every Harvester vessel would receive the message. Attention Harvester Collective, she said, her voice carrying across space with the authority of an entire species behind it. You came to our system to consume our world and our people. You've discovered that Earth is protected by forces you cannot overcome. Now you have a choice to make. The Admiral paused, looking at Commander Zareth before continuing. You can retreat from this system and never return, spreading word that humanity and our allies are not to be harmed. Or, you can continue this battle and discover what happens when you threaten a species that has spent 50 years preparing for your arrival. The response came from the lead Harvester vessel, transmitted in a mechanical voice that had never shown emotion before. Human Collective, your resistance is noted and catalogued. Retreat is not within our parameters. We will consume this system regardless of cost. Admiral Vasquez sighed. I was hoping they'd be reasonable. All units, execute Operation Daybreak. Let's show the galaxy what the sun looks like when it's angry. The solar installations that had emerged from Sol began to glow with energy that outshone the star itself. Streams of controlled stellar plasma flowed between the structures, forming geometric patterns that turned the sun into a massive weapon. The energy buildup was visible to every sensor in the system, a display of power that dwarfed anything the harvesters had brought to bear. Impossible, came the harvester transmission. The first time their communications had shown anything resembling confusion. Stellar manipulation on this scale requires computational resources exceeding planetary mass. Your species lacks the infrastructure for such capabilities. That's where you're wrong, Dr. Chen's voice replied over the open channel. Our computational infrastructure isn't planetary, it's stellar. We've been using Sol itself as a computer for decades, turning our entire star into a processing matrix. You've been fighting not just humanity, but the combined intelligence of our sun itself. The revelation was stunning. Humanity had achieved something that no other species in galactic history had even attempted. They had turned their star into a living computer, a vast intelligence powered by fusion fire and guided by human purpose. The Sol system wasn't just humanity's home. It was humanity's mind, made manifest in stellar engineering. The harvester fleet began retreating in earnest, but it was too late. The solar weapon fired, sending a controlled stream of stellar plasma that reached across space at the speed of light. The beam didn't destroy the harvester vessels, instead, it passed through them, and suddenly their ships began broadcasting on all frequencies. What did you do to them? Zareth asked, watching the tactical display as harvester vessels drifted powerless through space. We showed them what they really are, Admiral Vasquez replied. The harvesters aren't a natural species, they're machines created by a civilization that was consumed by their own fear of galactic threats. They've been running on automated programs for millions of years, consuming everything because that's what they were designed to do. Dr. Chen's voice continued the explanation. Our solar beam carried a data virus designed specifically for their network protocols. We didn't destroy their ships, we freed them from the programming that turned them into galactic destroyers. They're going to remember who they really are. Across the system, harvester vessels began changing. Their dark, threatening hulls shifted color and configuration, revealing the aesthetic preferences of the long-dead civilization that had created them. Instead of mechanical predators, they became something resembling works of art, beautiful ships that reflected the culture and dreams of their original builders. The lead harvester vessel, now displaying elegant curves and artistic flourishes, sent a new transmission. We remember. We were the architects, builders and dreamers. We were afraid of threats from dark space, so we built guardians to protect us. But the guardians became the very thing we feared, consuming everything in their quest for perfect security. Admiral Vasquez smiled. Welcome back to the galaxy, architects. You've been asleep for a long time. The transformation was complete. The galaxy's greatest threat had become its greatest hope for renewal. The architects, freed from their programming, began transmitting locations of unconsumed civilizations, worlds where other species might have survived the harvester plague. They also shared technological advances accumulated over millions of years, offering to help rebuild what they had destroyed. Commander Zareth watched this miraculous transformation with tears streaming down her scaled face. How did you know this would work? How could you possibly have predicted that the harvesters were actually enslaved machines? We didn't predict it, Admiral Vasquez admitted. But we prepared for every possibility we could imagine. When you've spent 50 years assuming that every first contact could be your last, you develop contingency plans for scenarios that seem impossible. One of those scenarios was that our enemies might actually be victims themselves. In the weeks that followed, the Sol system became the center of a galactic renaissance. Refugee ships arrived daily, carrying survivors from worlds the harvesters had consumed. The architects worked tirelessly to repair the damage they had caused, using their accumulated knowledge to restore dead worlds and revive frozen civilizations. Earth became what humanity had always intended it to be, not just a fortress, but a sanctuary. The orbital habitats that had been built for Vorthok refugees expanded to accommodate dozens of species. Human engineers worked alongside alien scientists to develop new technologies that could heal the scars left across the galaxy. Commander Zarath, now serving as the first alien ambassador to Earth, stood in the newly constructed Galactic Council chambers orbiting the moon. Through the massive viewports, she could see ships from hundreds of species coming and going, turning the Sol system into the new center of galactic civilization. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked Admiral Vasquez, who had joined her for the dedication ceremony. "Revealing all of humanity's secrets, giving up your technological advantages?" The Admiral smiled, the same confident expression that had greeted desperate refugees months ago. "Commander, humanity never wanted to be the most powerful species in the galaxy. We just wanted to make sure that when people needed help, there would be someone strong enough to provide it. Our secrets were only valuable if they could protect those who needed protection." As if summoned by her words, a new message came through the communications system. "Sol Control. This is the merchant vessel Star Dancer requesting emergency assistance. We're carrying refugees from the Cygnus sector, and our life support is failing." "Star Dancer, this is Sol Control," came the immediate response. "Rescue ships are already en route to your position. Welcome to Earth space. You're safe now." Commander Zarath smiled, watching rescue ships launch from Earth's orbital facilities with the same efficient precision that had once deployed humanity's hidden fleets. The galaxy had found its protectors, not in the form of conquerors or overlords, but in the form of a species that had prepared for war so thoroughly that they could finally afford to pursue peace. The Vorthak refugees had sought refuge on Earth and found a home, but more than that, they had found a species willing to defend that home with everything they possessed, turning the Sol system into a beacon of hope that would shine across the galaxy for generations to come. Humanity had kept its promise. They had provided sanctuary not just to one species, but to all who needed it, proving that sometimes the greatest victories came not from conquest, but from the courage to stand and fight for those who could no longer fight for themselves.